play, I cannot stress enough on the importance of playing together. So I think you would have heard of the quote which says, the family that plays together stays together, right? So I believe that if parents find enough time to play with their children, and when I say play, this is not the educational play, we tend to make everything have an educational element to it, but it's just the simple bouncing off a ball with each other. It's being able to play board games, even your dumb charades, your I Spy games, any kind of play that you can have with your child is going to be so great for the development of your child's emotional well-being, for your own bond with your child. So I believe that playing with your child more and more often is going to help in a lot of ways that is intangible right now, but I'm sure that parents can find 15-20 minutes in a day to play with the child, and it'll do a lot of good for the adult as well.
Welcome to episode 13 of the Learn and Unlearn podcast. This is Gautam, and in this episode, I have a conversation with Preethi Vickram. Preethi is the founder of Tapas Progressive Learning and Leadership Initiative for Educators. She is a committed educator, play exponent, passionate parenting coach, leadership mentor, and a brand champion. She is also the master franchisee of Podar Jumbo Kids in Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. Welcome, Preethi. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Gautam.
To start with, can you please tell us about the journey behind Tapas Progressive Learning?
Sure. So I've been an educator for the last 19 years, and most of that time has been with the early years. And through this journey, what I have been feeling a lot of times is that sometimes we're not equipped to do what is right for the children, and we are just following what somebody else has put into place. And so I've been having this turmoil within me that maybe we are not doing enough. And so about 5 years ago, I started an organization called LIFE, Leadership Initiative for Educators, which is a not-for-profit meant for educators to come together to learn about what's happening around the world, etc. Even that didn't seem enough, because I arranged for conferences, was thinking about how we can bring about a change and how we can start a revolution. So even that didn't seem enough over the last 4-5 years that I've worked on that. So I said, instead of preaching about how education should change, it's better to actually do something about it and then become the model school that can lead the way for how education should look like for students who have varied interests, students who learn differently, and students who require the respect of everybody around them. So that's where the thought of Tapas started with. Plus, I think in my own personal life, with my son, I've experienced that I just did not have the heart to put him into a mainstream conventional school. My son Gautam was an early reader, and by the age of 4, he was able to read the headlines, and it's been a fantastic journey with him. So when I started looking for admissions for him into first grade, I realized that no schools met the criteria that I wanted about giving value-based education. And so you can say that both personally and professionally have gone through this turmoil, and which is the whole reason why we set up Tapas.
Very interesting. And as you rightly mentioned, to truly achieve holistic education, it should cover the teachers as well as the children.
That's right.
Can you please also talk about LIFE and what it does, as well as Tapas in more detail?
Certainly. So what LIFE does is it's a membership-based organization. We encourage leaders in the space of education. They could be teacher leaders, they could be heads of schools, principals, anybody who believes that they are in a position to bring about change or implement or have some influence on the community. We invite them to become members of our organization. Um, Once they are a member, they get access to resources from across the world, trends about what's happening, research about what's happening, and they also get access to conferences, workshops, and just be connected together as a community and share best practices. So I've tried to capture life in a nutshell, and but it has been a very interesting journey, considering that I'm advocating change, and that's not something that's easy, as you would know, Gautam. So it's been a very interesting journey to get traction and get people to accept what we are trying to do here. So that has been the journey with life. When it comes to tapas, um, I'm fortunate to have four more similar, uh, like minded people join me in this journey. I have four more co founders, and all five of us are passionate educators. We come from a background of having run our own educational institutions, though they are all preschools, but we do come from a background of having run educational institutions and knowing how a quality educational institution should be run. And with that, and with the passion in mind, we were able to start the research about a year and a half ago about what we want in our school. And so it has been a great journey the last 1.5 year when we took the step to start tapas. And I think even a few years even before the actual coming together of all five of us, we have been talking about this for a very long time. And I have to say, Gautam, tapas is a baby of the pandemic. And I feel that the pandemic really pushed us into starting this because we felt this is the best time, especially since parents now understand that education has to be very different. The pandemic has forced us to really pivot our thinking about what our children require for the future. And so I'm very hopeful that this paradigm shift in the parents' minds is going to help in promoting what Tapas does.
Interesting. Can you please talk about the process of learning at Tapas?
Sure. So the basic premise at Tapas is that children learn better when the concept is presented in a contextual manner. Now, to break that down, imagine if a child has to learn about the circumference of a circle. It's a very abstract concept when you talk of a circle, and especially if you're drawing it on a board and it's not something that's tangible. It's something so abstract that it makes the child think of it only in terms of two dimensions, in terms of answering the question in the exams, right? If you want the child to really understand the circumference of a circle, one of the lessons that we have done at Tapas is that the child will understand, okay, if I need a plate for having lunch every day, my plate needs to have so much space for the rice, so much space for the sabzi, so much for the rasam and the sambar, and all these things. So how big should my plate be? So they take this understanding of how big the plate should be, they go to the terracotta corner, they make a plate with clay, and then they bake it in the kiln, and then check whether their hypothesis was correct. Is that plate big enough? Now, when I'm talking about using this kind of a process of learning, where the child has experienced the circumference of a circle in a very contextual manner, whether it's the diameter, the radius, whatever it is, this kind of learning, I believe, is something that will stay for life. Because now they are not just learning it as an abstract concept, but they are learning it as a very concrete, in terms of application in real life. And so that's what we have tried to do at Tapas with all our concepts, that it will be experiential learning. So you can think of it as a flipped classroom where children are doing their research work, understanding the concepts in our libraries, in our through the research they are doing on their computers, etc. So they are learning about concepts outside the classroom, and they come into the classroom to implement what they have learned, to debate about it, to discuss it, and then maybe pick up a project that will encapsulate all that they have learned.
Very interesting. You also mentioned facilitators instead of teachers.
Oh yes.
That's a great way to put it.
So like like you would also agree, and like you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, it's most important that teachers are learning alongside with students. And so we believe that they are facilitators because they're only helping the child to find the challenge and to overcome the obstacles and to move forward. So they are really facilitating the learning. And at Tapas, the facilitators move along with the children. So the subject matter expertise is the child for that facilitator and not the actual subject of science or math or social studies or anything like that. So when they're spending so much time with the child, year on year, they are really able to understand how this child learns and make changes as per the requirement and of the child, and actually customize education for that child's needs. And so there are no teachers; they are facilitators. And if you know, uh, in Sanskrit, there are 5 levels of the guru, right? And so that's what we believe in. So in terms of our facilitators, they should be able to go from being a teacher right up to being a guru. So that's our intention for our all our teaching staff.
Interesting. As a parent, I believe the role of a parent is similar to that of a gardener, where the gardener provides a nourishing environment for the plant and protects it from predators. So, can you please tell us about the role that parents have to play in providing a nourishing environment for children and how we can do it?
Sure. I think, like you have rightly identified, parents, of course, are providing the most important aspect of the child's development, that is the a nurturing environment, right? And with I think with parents nowadays, there's just too much information, and possibly the wisdom that was passed down by our older generations are getting diluted with the wisdom we are getting through the so-called Google search engine, right? And unfortunately, today, with the breakdown of the family system, of whether it was an extended family or uh, living in a joint family, unfortunately, because of the breakdown of that system, I feel parents are left to tend for themselves in this world of parenting. And uh, this, I feel, has led to us trying to do things a little differently than how we were brought up as children, right? So I think we're all doing trial and error and seeing what best we can do with the resources that we have with ourselves. So there are, I've just recently written an article about how we can parent, and the acronym for that is, I say that happy parent, where H stands for humor. uh, um, I do have a sense of humor, and the thought of how I presented a paper on humor development in children at one of the conferences at NACI. So when I was researching about humor, the findings came out that children laugh about 200 times in a day, whereas we as adults laugh about 7 or 8 times in a day. And that's really sad, right? As adults, we obviously need to laugh more. But what was interesting when I was doing that paper on humor is that the cognitive development stages that Eric Erikson has presented, and it is very similar to how humor develops in children as well. So it's very congruent, and so it's extremely important that parents spend enough time with their children laughing. Apart from the benefits of developing the brain itself, humor has a lot of benefits in terms of the emotional development of the child. And so I feel that we do not use humor enough with our children. Do we tell jokes with each other? Are we able to laugh off big problems that we are having? If the child has made a mistake, what is our first reaction? Our go to tool should be to laugh it off and say, okay, now let's see how we can overcome this. The child has spilled something. The first reaction is, oh my God, what have you done? But instead of that, if we are able to laugh and then say, let's look at how we can clean it up together, and then then probably when the child is not so defensive or not so scared, you're able to sit down and have a conversation of how that could have been done differently. So I say that humor is a great way of helping diffuse the situation, of helping overcome your barrier of talking to a new person. You can use humor in a lot many ways, but most importantly, humor is a forgotten tool in a parent's kit. I think parents should learn to laugh a lot more at their own mistakes and as well as their children's mistakes. A is for being adaptive, and I think that is the word that we all have to have for the future, right? I think this 1 year has proven that if we are not able to adapt to change quickly, we are going to perish. So I feel that parenting also has to change from time to time, and that is something that uh, most of us forget, because if something has worked for us, a way of parenting has worked for us in the early years, we tend to continue using the same methods. But I feel that we need to keep changing, be in touch with our children more often, and keep changing the way we parent and adapt it to the circumstances. I think being adaptive is important even in parenting.
Absolutely.
The next one is P for play, and I think you would have seen from my profile that I'm a big proponent of play, and play. I cannot stress enough on the importance of playing together. So I think you would have heard of the quote which says, "The family that plays together stays together." Right. So I believe that. If parents find enough time to play with their children, and when I say play, this is not the educational play, we tend to make everything have an educational element to it, but it's just the simple bouncing off a ball with each other. It's being able to play board games, even your dumb charades, your I Spy games, any kind of play that you can have with your child is going to be so great for the development of your child's emotional well-being, for your own bond with your child. So I believe that playing with your child more and more often is going to help in a lot of ways that is intangible right now, but I'm sure that parents can find 15-20 minutes in a day to play with the child, and it'll do a lot of good for the adult as well. So I came across this research by Dr. Peter Gray, which talks about the importance of play from an existential perspective. Now, he says that as hunter gatherers, when we were in our nomadic ages, right, there was a lot of importance placed on play, because we had to do trial and error. We had to find ways to do things. So it's inbuilt in our DNA to play, in our DNA to be curious, to discover things. And unfortunately, today we believe that play happens only with young children and only with children when they go to the playground. So I think that mindset has to change when it comes to playing. And especially as adults, we need to play more.
Very true.
The other P in happy is positive reinforcement. Now, this is something that I talk to teachers also quite often. As a society, we are hardwired to find mistakes. Especially I think the testers of the in the software world today are hardwired to find mistake, right? So even in parenting, we make the mistake of finding what the child has done wrong and reprimanding them for it. Instead, I feel that if we are able to positively reinforce the good behaviors that we find in a child, there is a much higher need for the child to revisit that good behavior because it has been positively reinforced. So instead of finding things that the child is doing wrong, so if you're having trouble that your child is not spending enough time with the books, is not putting in enough effort with his studies, don't find the times that the child is goofing off and then scold them at that time. Find the times when you have the child sitting with the books and appreciate them during that time. So instead of negative, make it positive. So that's the other P.
Yes, and as you rightly mentioned, children never misbehave because they don't know what misbehaving actually means. They are
Exactly.
still learning, they are still exploring the world.
True, and I feel that they're little scientists, and they're constantly trying to see how much can I push. So it's like an experiment in their mind, and they're saying, okay, so where is his breaking point? How much can I push? And so do not become a guinea pig for their experiments. That's what I have to say. What you should be doing instead is finding ways of engaging with the children, and uh, understanding that if they are curious about behavior and how the others are behaving, uh, allow them and ask them the right questions. So especially if a child is having a meltdown, that's not the time to be talking to them about how they should be behaving. It's about acknowledging that the child is having a meltdown. Say you're in a supermarket, your child is having a meltdown, and is crying and kicking and possibly on the floor, and things like that, and we're worried about what the others are thinking about us. So instead, I feel that you sit down and say, okay, I know that you're feeling upset, I know how you're feeling. Here, hold my hand for a couple of seconds. So there are a lot of strategies what we can use for positive reinforcement, and that's a whole session by itself, Gautam. The Y in happy stands for yourself as a parent. Many of us forget, especially with women. I see that we forget uh, to take care of ourselves once we have had a child, and then it becomes all about the child and the family and taking care of the family. So what I've written in my article is also about when you go on an airplane, and as part of the safety instructions, they tell you to put on the oxygen mask on yourself first before you take care of the people around you. So I think it's extremely important that we take care of ourselves, and this means having a little downtime, being able to catch up on the reading that you've planned, being able to do your crosswords, or just give yourself a massage. Lots of ways that you can pamper yourself, and most importantly, not feel guilty about it. Even if we are taking a day off, let's not feel guilty about doing that. I think it's important that if we take care of ourselves, it also means that we are in a much better position to take care of the people around us. So, Y stands for yourself, making sure that you're taking care of yourself.
Exactly. Talking about guilt, we seem to be getting into a kind of FOMO parenting or fear of missing out parenting where we want our child to get into all kinds of classes and we compare our child with other children who are into everything. What are your thoughts on dealing with this?
Right. I think, like you yourself said it, it's the fear of missing out, and it's propagated a lot more because of social media. When you go to social media, you see somebody else's child doing something better, and I mean, social media is so misleading, isn't it? With everybody's life being the perfect version of it on social media. So I think there's a lot of pressure on parents today, because earlier we had more number of children, so our parents had more number of children, so there wasn't so much pressure on making sure that one will succeed and do the best in their lives. But today, with the limited number of children that we are having, unfortunately they become they are supposed to be the bearers of our futures. So unfortunately, the pressure on parents is very high to ensure that their child succeeds, and this is something that we have done to ourselves. We have built that pressure ourselves, and I don't think society is expecting anything out of us, in terms of parenting. um, I feel that children will have varied interests, varied mm, uh, you know uh, forms that they want to pursue through their life. I mean, I'm sure, Gautam, you also yourself would have had at different stages of life, you would have thought of getting into different professions. So you wouldn't have always thought that you will be at a corporate, working in a corporate with, maybe 8-10 hours in front of a computer. I don't know if that's what you thought when you started off as a young child. So it's important to allow them to uh, like something and pursue it at their will. So maybe today, again, the pandemic has given us the opportunity to try a few hundred things and then see what I like, because everything is online. So I can try a few things and see uh, what I like, and then look at pursuing that more seriously. So I think parents should relax a little bit, because no matter what we do, the children will grow up and they will grow up well. So if we are having fear of anything, it's the fear of missing out on the beautiful growing up years that we should have. We should be spending time with our children, playing with them and laughing with them. So that's my take.
Wonderful. We focus so much on the destination that we forget the journey.
True. That's right.
Talking about the formal education system, what do you think are the limitations in the current formal education system?
Right. So, just before we started Tapas, like I said, we did a lot of research. And one of the things that we did as part of the research was talk to a lot of parents. And we had some primary data collection through interviews of parents that we all had in our circles, having children of different age groups. Um, what that helped us understand is that parents are aware that the present education system does not cater to the needs of their child. For example, parents had the fear that, my child's learning style is different. My child doesn't, he hates sitting in the classroom and he hates writing. So they had different styles of learning. But unfortunately, in a classroom of 40, 50 children, the teacher does not have the time to address that difference, address that uniqueness of the child. So I believe that India has such vast numbers that our schools are filling up, and because of that, there is a lot of pressure on the teachers as well. So um, it's kind of cyclical, right? So there is pressure on the teachers to complete the syllabus so that the child can do well in the exams, because then the parents are pressurizing the children to do well in the exams. So I think they're all pushing each other in the wrong direction. And the conventional schooling also does not allow the teacher to understand the developmental milestones of that particular age group. So we are not trained to know what a 5 year old should know. We are not trained to know by the age of, say, 12, what are the skills the child should have. Instead, we are driven by, for example, that by seventh grade, the child should know all these topics, all these concepts. I think we are going in the reverse direction. In a conventional school, this is more often the case. So instead of allowing the child to guide us based on the stage of development they are at, we are forcing them to follow a pre-prescribed notion of what we believe they should know. So again, going back to not being able to customize education for children. So that's a big problem with our present education system. And obviously, a bigger problem that I feel is the way we are assessing our children. Unfortunately, we are so focused on having standardized tests so that children are marked on the same questions and we know how much the child has learned. It's a very unfortunate stage, and I'm sure you've read Einstein's quote, which says that if you mark a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it's going to live its life thinking it's stupid, right?
Yes.
So this is a great meme and everybody has seen it, but then we very rarely follow it and we blame it on the system. So we say that the system is wrong, and then we're all waiting for the system to change. But I'm very excited with the national education policy, because I think the change that we've all been talking about, and we know that the system is broken, but finally the policy is now going to allow us to hopefully fix this system. right? And so assessments is something that I'm again very uncomfortable with the way it's done in a conventional school. So, Gautam, I'd like to tell you about how it's done at Tapas and how I feel this is how it should be done across other schools also. We have two types of assessments. One is the formative assessment and the other is the summative assessments. Now, summative assessments are done at the end of a term or a year where we are seeing how much the child has understood about that entire period of time. Whereas a formative assessment is much more important for the facilitator or the teacher to have. At Tapas, we have built in these into the lessons itself. For example, if how would the facilitator know whether the child has learned or not learned about the concept that was there for the day? We have something called as exit slips. At the end of the day, the child has to fill out an exit slip before leaving the school to say, I learned this, and tomorrow I would like to learn more about this. And so they have to fill that up. These are very quick ways of getting and assessing what the child has learned and whether your own lesson has been effective or not. And so we have built in formative assessments at different checkpoints during the academic year. At the end of the year, what we do is more, for the senior grades, we don't do summative assessments up to sixth grade. We are only doing formative assessments. And so preparation for the exams and looking to have children appearing for their boards by 10th grade, so that preparation starts from the 7th grade onwards. And slowly they are eased into the system of understanding why it is important to have a timed approach when you're answering your questions, why it is important to present your answers in a way in which the person who is correcting it is going to understand. So all that preparation happens from 7th grade onwards, where they are already conceptually very, very sound.
This is definitely very important, and this will help a lot.
Right. And there are many checkpoints. Like I said, it's not just about the exit slips. And so, as part of the understanding of math and mental math, you could have children do a role play. You could have children do a role play on one being a shopkeeper, the other coming in to buy some products, and if just the addition and subtraction and how quickly are they able to do that. And that also is something that the teacher is observing, right? And that becomes another way of assessing whether they have learned those concepts or not. So formative assessments can take many shapes and forms, and it's something that again depends on how in tune the teacher is to what's happening in the classroom, and how much time she's able to allocate for observations.
Yes, the individual attention is very much important.
True. And I think that's the most critical element of education, because it's finally the child can learn anywhere, right? They can learn at home even with a computer. But the facilitator asking the right questions, putting across the right challenges, and really customizing what the child is learning, and that makes all the difference. I think that's the most critical part of education going forward.
Absolutely. I'm also curious to know the future plans of Tapas.
Sure. So Tapas is presently functioning out of our Banshankari campus, which will accommodate about 80 students. So this present cohort will have 40, and the next year we are looking to take in 40 more. And our main campus is being constructed in JP Nagar 7th phase, and we hope to welcome students there by the year 2023. And that will have a total capacity of 475 students only. And hence, what we're trying to do essentially is limit the number of students in terms of the intake, so that we are able to guarantee the kind of individualized education that we are talking about. So, which is why we have limited our numbers. Tapas will continue to grow and keep changing. I feel that we need to keep recalibrating ourselves and look at what are the practices that we can have to improve ourselves. And so just as the national education policy is going to be implemented in the country, I believe that we will be among the forerunners of how that implementation can take place.
Wonderful, Preeti. This has been an amazing conversation. Thanks a lot for your time.
Yes, Gautam, likewise. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about topics that were really close to my heart.
Thanks a lot for listening. If you like this episode, please share it with others. I'll see you in the next episode.